Hey everyone, I'm your host, Robbie Strazynski, and thanks so much for joining us on episode number 70 of CardsChat, the friendliest poker podcast in town. Today's guest is one of the greatest mixed game players in all of poker. In 2021, he won not only his fourth WSOP bracelet, to add to his lead as the UK's most decorated player in WSOP history, but he also won his fourth WCOOP and sixth Scoop titles. He's been dominant in both the live and online realms for several years now, to the tune of over $3 million in live tournament earnings and over $1.4 million in online earnings. Today, we get to know the Crusher a little bit better. Benny Glaser, welcome to the CardsChat podcast.
Thank you. It's quite an intro. Thanks for having me.
Well earned, sir. Well earned, and hard earned and hard worked for. I gotta say, we've kind of known each other, interacted, a little bit here and there over the years, but this is my first opportunity to have an extended conversation with you. I'm super excited, and just full disclosure, I am a mixed game super fan, so I'm giddy as a schoolgirl to just talk mixed games with you for not the entire time, but for quite a while. Maybe I'll pick up a trick or two.
For sure, yeah. I've seen your mixed game festival, the Westgate, and that kind of stuff. I've definitely known of your fandom for mixed games.
I appreciate it, and occasionally I even win. Not bracelets, but I'm up lifetime, so that's good too. I appreciate it. Okay, so your story of getting into poker a little bit different than majority, I guess, of folks these days. You saw your father playing online, and that's how you became interested. I'm wondering, could you tell us sort of how old were you at the time? Can you elaborate a little bit on what it was like, sort of like your beginning, your introductions, as you began to sort of like, hey, I want to play this game myself?
So when I initially found my dad playing on it, I was about 14, 15. Online, first became interested by watching that, and then watching episodes on TV, the kind of old school back in the day where all the characters were so entertaining, and kind of got into it more and more from there progressively, and started taking it more and more seriously.
Well, we can tell by the accent you are of the British persuasion. Were you watching late night poker, or was it the WSOP broadcasts and the high stakes poker and stuff?
Definitely a lot of British ones. There's late night poker, poker after dark. I think probably one or two others that I'm forgetting that like 10, 15 years ago were just absolute classics on British TV. I don't think they were really World Series broadcasts so much ever, but there was, then eventually like high stakes poker as well, those cash games that did get my attention.
Okay. Well, anyone who's watched a good amount of poker on TV, we know that predominantly it's Texas Hold'em that gets the screen time. You walk into any poker room, you're seeing bunches and bunches of Hold'em tables. We love our mixed games, but Texas is where it's at. You're saying you got into poker from watching it on TV, watching your dad. Where did the mixed games come from?
So my dad was both limit and no limit hold'em, like that long ago. There was still like limit around. That was interesting. Then he delved into some PLO8 randomly, which also got my attention. Fascinating game and seemed very profitable as well at the time. And the other thing is that I was railing a lot of the like high stakes online games back in the day on Full Tilt, where the biggest games were the mixed games. There was the 7-game, 8-game, the 1500, 1500 3K. That was mostly running most games. You got Gus and those guys, and those were really interesting to me. That they were running for the biggest buy-ins for most days, and I was both entertained and trying to learn from them.
Interesting. So you learned by observation, or you started playing them as well, like free rolls and low limit stuff? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah, both. Watching was both interesting and I think educational for me. I was actually trying to analyze what they were doing quite often. I would go through hand histories that I would watch. Like at the end of the session that I played, I'd still like have a table open, go through hand histories, be like, oh, like actually trying to learn something as well as just the entertainment value. And yeah, then eventually start playing it myself again with free rolls, as you mentioned, and lower stakes, and trying to get in experience volume for that. Trying to improve that way. So
That's interesting. You're already talking about studying it, taking notes, looking at things analytically. Typically, that's something that we look at. Very serious recreational players and professionals do that. I mean, were you of the mindset to be a pro already at that point in time, or was this just, an extension of your fandom of the game?
I guess at the time it was more the latter. Like I didn't have like specific visions to be a pro. I didn't have like a specific goal or intentions with like, I'm going to be best. I'm going to, it was both just out of interest and trying to get better, both just as a way of learning and things I found interesting at the time, and trying to work out those things also was interesting to me. So yeah, and I both like enjoy trying to get better myself, somewhat like challenging myself in that department. So yeah, it wasn't like a specific goal, like I'm going to it just kind of got more progressively serious, things like that. Yeah.
That's really okay. Interesting. Well, most of the folks that I know who are not professional players, if they know mixed games, it's from their home games. Yes, some online as well, but they just get together with their buddies, their gal pals, and once a week, twice a week, once a month, whatever it is, they have the home game, and they have all the different wacky varieties, not much more than just the 8-game mix, even more so than the amount of games you find at the dealer's choice at the WSOP. Did you ever kind of have that and say it's a good opportunity to get some reps in and it won't cost me too much?
I wish I had that, honestly. There's nothing like that in the UK, like almost at all. I played almost no live. I played like no mixed games in the UK almost ever.
Wow.
I had not very many like local poker friends, like long time ago, and that was only ever Hold'em. So unfortunately, no, never had that kind of experience that I would have liked to, both for educational and fun purposes. And yeah, it wasn't until basically I was traveling to the US where I started learning those extra crazier games. Yeah.
That seems to be sort of a sub poker culture thing that's just lacking in some way. Why do you think that is? And again, like the fact of the matter is, it may be small and niche, but it does exist in the States quite a bit, and I'd say even in Europe there is a little bit of it. But the UK, nothing. You wouldn't find it in poker rooms at all.
Occasionally, I mean, just in general, poker isn't as big of a thing in the UK as it is in the US. Like obviously some, but just as the population, the subset of X population, there's going to be like much fewer mixed games. So there are like one or two games that are kind of pot limit dealer's choice. I think I've heard in like London and I think it was Blackpool. I've never actually played those, but I've heard they exist. But it's pretty much just like one or two spots in the whole country. It's just like one specific game that occasionally runs. Beyond that, the reasons I don't necessarily know. Unfortunately, like there have been times like I've tried to start mixed games in London. There was like one mixed game that ran at the Victoria Casino, which is the biggest one in London. But that was like a semi kind of private scheduled game that would run like once or twice a month. That was like by like already established, pros and regs who would play it. So that would occasionally run. But as far as learning, there's just like nothing really. It's just rare to find in general places outside of like London, any reasonable stakes anyway. Like casinos around me, nothing bigger than like 1-2 runs ever. Yeah.
Right.
So
that's interesting. So your path towards just mixed game superstardom is, very unicorn-like. in that way. You like really kind of emerged from nothing, as it were. Wow, that's extra fascinating. At what point, though, did things change for you from just sort of being a fan, extension of the fandom, to saying, okay, I want to make a living doing this? And, sort of like an addendum to the question, did you have any other sort of professional aspirations before poker that maybe you had turned away from?
Yeah, I think I have to answer that. So I was obviously playing online quite a lot. So there was a few years where I was grinding, pretty low stakes. And up until it was basically 2014 when I took my first shot at the World Series. And I was still playing like relatively low limits, like 2-4, 4-8, basically. And then went out for the World Series and was still like playing like part-time essentially. And then 2015, when I went out there the second time and fortunately won my bracelet, my first bracelet, that it kind of took off from there, really, where it kind of launched further in, like both bankroll wise, obviously, and felt like from that point I could take it as a full-time profession from there, basically. So it just kind of gradually went more full-time into like 2014, where both I could see I was personally getting better, and I could see that I was beating the games, and it was a more viable profession and more viable option when I'm clearly like getting better at that point as well. So I could see that I had a future at that time. So yeah, that was that point. And for your second question, it wasn't like specifically something I turned away, but kind of a year or two prior, I was hoping to go to a music institute actually to study guitar performance. So that was the main thing. It was just like studying, which didn't come to fruition at that time because of poker. But yeah, that was the other main thing on my horizon.
You still have an affinity for music, for guitar playing, ever since you were a little boy and such. I guess, what does music make you feel? When you pick up the guitar to play, even if it's a little bit more rare nowadays than it used to be. What are you sort of chasing, and what sort of flow are you hoping to reach there?
Interesting questions. What am I chasing? What does it make me feel? A lot. Music I'm very passionate about, and has a potential for all kinds of feelings and emotions, and like especially when playing guitar, it's very enjoyable. So yeah, mostly
Okay.
I guess happiness or like joy and passion, aliveness, all that kind of good stuff I enjoy. What am I chasing? I guess more things to that effect. Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. Some people turn to music for a variety of different reasons. I'm curious where that came, because it's a lifelong passion. So
for sure, that's what I was trying to think how to answer, and to answer like those specific questions, I could potentially go deeper in a few ways. But yeah, that's it in a kind of nutshell, I guess.
okay. Well, we'll switch gears back out of music. You mentioned your first trip to the WSOP 2014.
Yeah.
Being the way you sort of developed as a player, and as we sort of have covered, the unicorn as far as mixed games, you travel across the pond, and all of a sudden you see an entire room full of people who, hey, these guys do what I do, these guys like what I like, guys and gals. What does that make you feel walking into the Rio, and sort of knowing that there's a whole bunches of others like you, and they don't just exist online?
It was very cool. I'm trying to think exactly, like back to my memories then. I can't think into like such detail, but I'm sure I loved it for my first World Series. Before becoming a bit more jaded by it in more recent times.
Okay.
Then yeah, I'm sure it was very exciting with the more electric atmosphere. And I know I was definitely excited by like seeing all the like pros that I've heard of from online and from TV that I've obviously never seen in person before, never played with before. And that was definitely exciting. And also just the actual playing with them when I did eventually get to it, like that was definitely exciting.
Sure.
For my first time, yeah, I knew I enjoyed that.
And being that you didn't really have, I don't know, a posse of sorts in the UK where you had been based, when all of a sudden you land there and you see all these folks, was there anyone who you kind of gravitated to, became more friendly with, whether it's for, excuse me, for strategy purposes, bouncing hands off of, or just, as far as camaraderie and the shared joy of mixed games? Did that happen over the years?
Somewhat, yeah. Over the years, like it shifted, but yeah, right around the time of my first World Series, the main person I was becoming friends with is Adam Owen, who's one of the other very few UK mixed game players. So yeah, I think that was my first World Series when I met him there, from previously like talking online for a year or two, having not met there. So as far as that goes, it was maybe it around that time, especially for mixed games. As you said, or as we've established, there's almost like nothing in the UK, unfortunately. So there's just very few that I would know from either live or online. And I hadn't really traveled too much at that point yet. So at that point, I hadn't really got like, American or other European friends, which obviously I came kind of later. So sure, over the years since then, I've got more American friends that I can bounce off ideas, and even like Russian friends since, from like the EPT stops and things like that. So yeah, I guess that's shifted since, but yeah.
You feel that that's helped you improve as a player? Because, and I asked that specifically because, you made it your own way, when you started out and then you first landed there, and then all of a sudden, you do get to experience the live play, but, just a little bit more of that bonding. Do you feel that that's helped improve, or have you sort of stayed in your own lane as far as your growth strategy wise and, talents wise, I guess, for lack of a better phrase?
Yeah, it was definitely important for me, especially in the kind of the middle stages of my improvement, where there's obviously such little material online for mixed games that it's much tougher essentially to improve than it is for No Limit, both because of material and as far as any kind of like solutions go, which even No Limit players who are starting by themselves are able to just like look at solutions more readily. So it is more important for mixed game players, I think, in general, to be seeking out from other people as far as ways to improve, just because of how little content there is and other ways to improve there are. So yeah, that was definitely very important for me. And it's, I guess, been something I've relied on less in recent years, but yeah, definitely a few years ago, I was valuing that very highly. And like even since, like even in my No Limit improvement, it's been incredibly important. So actually, that's probably what I've been talking about more is recent years with friends is No Limit. But yeah, absolutely, that was one of the most important things for my improvement.
Pretty cool. Well, 2022, 2021, you're definitely very, very far down that road of improvement. Like I say, relying on it less. I would venture to guess, because you're pretty close to the top, if not at the top of that mountain there. we mentioned off the top, you are the most decorated WSOP player ever from the UK. You won your 4th bracelet this past fall in the 10K Raz event. How much does that mean to you? And when you're just 32 years old, and I'm 40, and I always make myself seem older that way, but 32 to have achieved that much success, that's pretty darn awesome. Is this kind of like how you envisioned it going, or what are your sort of impressions at this stage of your career?
Well, it definitely still means a lot. Still does feel awesome, as you said. When you say envision it going, like at what stage? Like before my poker career, or like?
Well, when you first started out, like we say, obviously the goal is to win as much money possible, but as tournament professionals go, it's a matter of trophies, awards, and not just being results oriented process, but still like getting that trophy case of accolades is pretty nice.
Sure. I mean, like before I had achieved the success that, as far as what I envisioned, would have been much lower than my current success, essentially. So I've absolutely surpassed any visions that I might have had before I was going seriously professional. So I would say absolutely exceeded expectations in a great way, and I'm obviously very happy for that. And it still does mean a lot. And specifically the 10K Raz still also did mean a lot to me. It's been 5 years since I won my previous bracelet, which kind of, I guess, it's a lot in terms of my career bracelet.
Sure.
So in that way, like I had like 2 seconds since, and a third like that year. So with close calls as well, it kind of, I guess, made it more meaningful as well. After having such disappointment before, and the way he talked about it as extra success and like cementing that kind of success, I think is also important to me, and means a lot. Like I appreciate how other people talk about that and me and things like that in that regard. So that's still something I appreciate a lot.
Well, we know, you can't really luck box your way to a final table. And you said it had been 5 years. You had some runner-up finishes. And man, when you got heads up, this was quite a battle. We could talk. You had a huge chip lead heads up against Everett Carlton. He battles back from just 4 big bets. Then he takes the lead. And then you manage to close it out. It's important. Like, okay, we see Benny Glaser, he won. Like, that's the context, folks. So does that carry any extra special sort of meaning? I mean, is there any sort of like just like pro athletes, when you're golfing or basketball, you take the free throws, you have to make the putt. Was there any sort of mental freezing or like what's going through your mind at that point in time, that critical juncture of the tournament when you're chasing, bracelet number 4?
Yeah, for sure. There was a lot that went into it. The other thing was that it got extended. The heads up was extended to a 4th day, where we were previously told on day 3, the tournament has to end today. It cannot go into another day. And then so we're playing heads up for something like an hour and a half at the end of day 3, and they're like, no, okay, we can end it here. It was like 3 a.m. We're all exhausted. So it went on to day 4. So that in itself was just hard because I'd had several days in a row of little sleep, and obviously coming into day 4 for heads up for a bracelet, still difficult to sleep. Adrenaline's going all night, preparing for this. And as you said as well, that added to it when at the start of day 4 he was at least a 2-to-1 chip lead, and I lost lots of frustrating hands. And sure, the mindset was not ideal at that point, but yeah, I mean, from experience, like I know I'm obviously capable of coming back from that kind of deficit, and still thought I was the better player at that time. So, still knew it could happen. And I felt as well at that time where he was becoming a bit less emotionally stable after he'd lost one or two hands. Like there's one point in the middle of the hand where he just like stood up and was walking around. And yeah, funnily enough, when I did eventually win, and from like going down to the trough where I was really not enjoying the situation so much,
Yeah.
it did feel, I think, better at that point. It's like more well earned. Like I fought harder for this, as if it's like harder than if it was just like an easy breeze, then it would feel less. Yeah. So I think that made the winning a bit sweeter too. Yeah.
That definitely takes a lot of intestinal fortitude, and clearly having been on that big stage before is one of those intangibles. It just helps take you to sort of a different level, have that extra gut check, extra gear. Well, okay, so results. Again, we're not supposed to be results oriented. We're supposed to be process oriented in poker, but you chose to do something very interesting. On Twitter, you recently posted your complete WSOP buy-ins and profits. It showed $216,100 in buy-ins and $784,233 in earnings, just under $570K in profit. That includes the Raz bracelet, a runner-up finish in the 25K horse, a third in the 10K no limit deuce 7 single draw. It was a great series by any stretch of the imagination for you. You're a humble guy, though. You're not braggadocious. I'm wondering what it is that you're hoping to do, because most people, we just see the Hendon mob. We don't know how much people bought in for. When you put that out there, what are you doing that for?
I mean, kind of as you said, people don't know how much you're buying in, and so it was part of that. Like I saw Negranian people were doing it for like transparency, and it seemed that like people were interested in it. Like I had one or two other friends who did it, like Brandon Jack Harris, for example. Was talking with a few other friends about it, where like on paper it might seem like someone has had a good series. Like they made like 3 final tables and Brandon got a 5th and 1 or 2 others, but he essentially kind of like broke even. Like, so it wasn't really a good series for him overall, when, obviously he's a winning player in the long run, is going to anticipate having a good series, and he's, working hard for 6 weeks. So whilst he might seem like he has 150, 200K in cashes, he might be being even for the series is, it's not really what you hope to achieve. And as part of that transparency as well, and I think people were just interested by it as well. And I try not to brag, but I didn't kind of do anything like that this series. It was nice, and I'm not gonna lie, I was proud.
Yeah. That's genuine. I mean, is part of the hope of doing that, to kind of like passively convince your fellow professionals that they ought to be doing the same?
No, I think probably not in this scenario. I generally don't like to do that overall. And I don't really think there's value in it. I don't know. Is there any value in it? I don't know. From
a media perspective, I don't mean to interrupt your thought process. From a media perspective, we always look, again, we only see, we can only track the earnings, right? And so there's perhaps a school of thought that says, well, it ought to perhaps be earnings minus buy-ins to have a more accurate reflection of just how successful, quote unquote, a person does in their tournament career. That's sort of where the question's coming from.
Sure. Yeah, and I definitely understand that perspective. obviously there are, amateurs who might be looking to turn professional, or just like looking at results and thinking that's so amazing, or this guy has millions in winnings. And as I say in like the previous example, that just might not be the case. Someone might be breaking even, or losing slightly. That is the kind of sad reality of it sometimes. Yeah. Or like in Negreanu's case as well, when he's got 2-putt and it's down on the year in some cases. Yeah.
Yeah. It also shows how sometimes one big tournament may make the difference. Even if you're just rebuying 7 or 8 bullets, you cash for a min cash, but you're down.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very familiar with that.
I didn't know. It was an innocent remark.
Yeah. I'm sure I could do it in other scenarios where it's been like online scoops and WCOOPs where I've won 1 or 2. There was the last 2 or 3 series when I got a first and second and broke even on the series because it was in the smaller buy-ins when I succeed, and then the high ones that I just brick, for example. So it can absolutely change in one tournament, or in which ones you run good in. Yeah.
Well, you said that the 4th bracelet had come 5 years later. It was a large chunk of time. Sure, you go year after year. 5 years is a long time. I think where I was 5 years ago, listeners, you can imagine where you are in your poker progression 5 years ago. Let's take a look at that very, very successful 2016 that you had. You won both the 1500 and the 10K limit Omaha 8 or better titles within 4 days of each other. You also had a 5th in the 10K no limit deuce 7 and a 12th in the 1500 no limit deuce 7. So I'm not gonna laundry list read it, but there's a reason behind it. Lots of us recreational players will put together a 1500 buy-in and okay, this is cool. We get to play for a bracelet. A lot of the pros, they play the $10,000 level. We don't necessarily get to taste that ever playing in a 10K, except if it's, like a bucket list main event kind of thing. What's the difference? Someone who's obviously done both, succeeded at both in a $1,500 WSOP field and a 10K field. Is there any way you can kind of quantify it?
The difference in ability of the opponents, or just both overall?
Sure.
I mean, so obviously there's the field sizes are very different.
Okay.
Where going to be something like 100-ish players on average in the 10K. But it depends on each variant as well. So even the 1500, 08, for example, can get almost 1,000 entries compared to some of the other 1500 where they can get 250 runners to 300. So I mean, the obvious answer is the standard is much better in the 10Ks, and it's not just the standard of each player, but it's the weighting in the field. That it didn't word that well, but how the field is weighted in terms of the good pros versus other recreationals. So you're going to get obviously fewer recreationals in the 10Ks. So it might be the case where all the same 80 pros or semi-pros or regs are going to play a 10K that has 120 runners in it, and they'll also play a 1500 that has 800 people in it, where they'll make up only 10% of that field versus 60% or however. So you're much more likely to get those at your table. The other thing is sometimes the ones who will play the 10Ks just might not play the 1500s because they don't want to play such big fields, and they just rather play cash games, for example, that run throughout the World Series, where there was a lot this year, where they just think their time is better spent there. Fair. So that's another way where 1500 fields are softer, and it's just going to be softer in ways of people who might have normal jobs and save up for a year to like, that's their shot. People generally in that scenario take their shot at like 1500. They're like, this is the one I'm going to try and put. They don't necessarily just like punt on a 10K.
Yep.
Where so
I don't know who you're talking about there. Certainly applies to me. Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you know what I mean. Obviously, that
Sure.
The 1500s, it's going to get a lot softer of a field overall. Yeah.
So what does a pro like you do to adjust to feels like that? I mean, I don't know that there's necessarily a parallel in a non-mind sport. I'm just, like a chess master, they're going to wipe the floor, with someone like me, or grandmaster. Basketball, any professional basketball player going to wipe the floor no matter what. But there's, a lot of landmines, I suppose, in a 1500. Recreational players, we go ahead and we play our home game, mixed games and stuff. Yeah, we're very admittedly not as experienced on the level. How do you adjust strategy wise as a professional? And I'm not just looking for tips to play when I enter the next one. Just wondering.
Yeah, I was trying to think of an analogy myself, but I can't really think of
Right,
it.
it's a unique situation.
So generally in the 1500s, playing more against recreational players than generally would play a more exploitative style, would play largely more aggressive style, where I feel I'm more able to in those fields, and I'm less likely to get punished in some way. And also just want to play generally a more aggressive style that I think can amass chips more easily, in more hopes of kind of winning rather than just 10K kind of, I guess, a min cash or whatever is somewhat more meaningful. Where the 1500s, I think, both in ways of trying to get to the final tables and in view of winning, but also potential other edges later in the tournament where having the bigger chip stack is more meaningful as well. So in those ways, it's different, as well as just in the 10Ks, I'm trying to overall play a kind of more solid style that's less exploitative when it's against largely good players.
Yeah. And your answer makes me think of a question. I hadn't prepared this one, but because it was it was kind of discussed ad infinitum this past fall, the idea of late reg, especially as pertains to the main event. That is something that folks like myself, I don't really necessarily understand this idea of late reg. And like you said, lots of us would go ahead and we'll save up a whole year, or this is our main event, the big 1500 8-game mix, or the 1500 7 stud, something like that. Yeah, I want to be there when they say shuffle up and deal. I don't want to miss a hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
So from a professional perspective, maybe just sort of teach us here. Late reg is good, not just because you want to sleep late, but there's got to be some sort of a rationale behind it.
Sure. I mean, the other main rationale is it's the World Series, so you're playing for a full 7 weeks. And someone like me who plays everything and wants to play basically every day almost, it's tough, man. If you're going to be playing from the start in every single tournament, you're going to be often playing like 10 hours a day. And it's a serious grind, like every day. It's exhausting if you're there from the start. So there's that, which is a huge factor in such a series, where it's obviously more so the case for pros rather than people who are just taking their shot in 3 to 5 events or something. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you want to still be able to try and play kind of your best for each event. Mm-hmm. So overall, your kind of mental cognitive ability is going to kind of deteriorate a bit more if you're just doing that every day for more hours each day. Then that can affect like a future tournament, where you're just playing your C game in every tournament, for example, if you're there from the start, just from the sheer number of hours that you're putting in. So there's both that, and if you value your time, then from the start playing 200 big blinds deep in a 1500 might not be worth someone's time who, a professional's time who's playing, let's say 300, 600 mixed games as well, like limit games. So, yeah.
Well, it's a very legitimate answer. It's important. There's no way I could understand that perspective myself. So I think that's just very interesting. And I guess perhaps, you correct me if I'm wrong here, perhaps an insight to be inferred or gleaned from what you said. Again, I'm just saying the majority of our audience, people like myself more on the recreational side. So we are going to go ahead, have a great night's sleep, show up for the weekend or whatever it is, play our event. If we're showing up early, it's happened to me a couple times, six-handed, and all these mixed games and stuff. There's 4 people at the table. You would recommend, as in principle, at least theoretically, as an aggressive an approach as possible to just try and accumulate chips for when the pros arrive, whenever they arrive?
It probably depends on each person in a few ways. One, because a recreational might just be less used to playing four-handed or just play it less correctly than a pro. Or let's say, there are like 2 other pros at your table four-handed, then that's not as good of a spot for you. Obviously, if it's six-handed, then there are 2 pros. So it's kind of hard to say. I think that's quite an individualistic thing. Especially when you might be similarly as likely to lose chips for when the pros arrive.
Yes, it can happen. Yes.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to answer that, to be honest.
Okay, that's fair. I can tell you're not kind of like hedging. There's no like golden path kind of answer, but it's just sort of interesting to always hear that insight.
Yeah, it depends on the event. Even like if it's a re-entry event, you might be playing more aggressively at the start, for example, as well. To potentially fire a second bullet. Yeah.
Well, for those who don't necessarily want to get too in the weeds with the strategy discussion, I got to change it up just a little bit with more of a fun question. You mentioned Brandon Shaq Harris, and plenty of folks who've been there either in person or have seen the pictures. You, Brandon Shaq Harris, Eric Rodewig, you guys have these bear costumes that you wear in the 1500 stud 8 at the WSOP. What's the deal? Who lost the bet? What's going on there?
It's voluntary.
Okay.
It started, I think, 3 years ago, possibly 4. They're basically Brandon. I think Brandon's, and also like there's a third one. I think that's Eric's. That basically went on to, I think it was that year, 3 years ago, where Brandon ended up getting second in the 1500 stud 8 whilst wearing that bear costume. And I think it happened again, like they wore it again the following year. And then this year, just purely for fun, I was like, if you have a spare bear costume, I'll take it this time. Because there's, it was Matt Ashton who wore the other one last time and he wasn't playing them this year. So I decided to be a bear for an event.
Okay. That's fun. It's good to have a little bit of fun. I like it. Okay, so let's pick the mixed game brain. What are some of the mixed games you'd like to see grow in popularity? Let's say you can had a lamp. You could wish for any game. I said this is going to be the we've seen PLO kind of grow in popularity. What would you like the next one to be? And perhaps that the WSOP needs to add a bracelet event that doesn't currently have on schedule.
So for the first question, my answer is basically always No Limit Single Draw, this 7.
Pure.
Hell yeah. That's my favorite game.
Okay.
Largely because of its purity, as you say straight away. I think it's a great game. Pure form of poker, lots of skill, lots of fun. I think it's generally enjoyed. Like there are mixed games, that people like less generally as a consensus. Like obviously over the years I've spoken to lots of people about it. So generally that's one that is liked through most of the mixed community, and I know it's also lots of people's favorite game too. So I think it's generally enjoyed by people who try it as well, like they're crossing over from No Limit. It's easier to transition into that than some of the other games.
Yeah.
And yeah, when I've spoken to like friends or other people who are trying it for the first time, especially as like that happens in the World Series, people are going for a bracelet. Then yeah, they really enjoy that one. And even like students of mine, for example, who are trying it, that want to learn that, also really enjoyed it. They're like, I love this. I want to get into this more. I'm going to watch this final table. I'm going to try and play this. Yeah, so that's absolutely would be my number one pick that I would like to see growing popularity.
Okay.
And then for your second question, as for the World Series adding, I don't really know. There are lots of people who would like to see a Badoogie event added, just a straight, yeah. So I guess that's feels like that's maybe the obvious answer because it's kind of been discussed. I don't know if it ever will be added. I would like to see it added. I think it's like lends itself to being a good and interesting tournament game too. Other than that, I don't really know. I guess I would like to see a straight Big O event. I think that would be good.
Okay, interesting.
Maybe even a No Limit variant, but I think that's less of a good game, or like I guess would maybe re-entries. But yeah, I think Big O, when it's only in the Dealer's Choice and the 08 mix right now, I think that would be good as a standalone event. That's also played like in other places in the US that I know. So yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Or, just to say, I did like Draw Mahal would be the other one that I would consider just for the fun of it. I don't think it would be a great event, but that's just like as far as some of the other circus games, that's maybe the other one I find more fun. Yeah.
Ramaha bracelet wearer, Benny Glaser. I like the ring. Very cool. You opened the door there to something I was unaware of. You said my students. I did not know that you teach. Tell us a little bit about that.
I do. For 4 or 5 years, I guess.
Okay.
And it's kind of generally rarer. It's both because, I mean, I travel a lot, so it's just harder to orchestrate it a lot of the time. And because mostly I'm just teaching mixed, so it's kind of niche and yeah. And like a lot of the people I teach or have taught are from like regulars already in some capacity, either in mixed events or like successful No Limit that are trying to transition over. Yeah, but I generally really enjoy it and find it fulfilling, and yeah.
You feel that makes you a better player as well?
It can do, yeah. I think you can occasionally see like perspectives from other people that's interesting, but I think it's probably more so that I like to stay like sharp, try to teach my students the best knowledge that I have, or the best knowledge that I'm have access to.
Okay.
So I try to like actively seek out the best info and try and keep myself as sharp as possible in order to be the best teacher I can and teach students the best I can. Yeah.
Okay, very, very complete answer. Way back in the day, the Doyle Brunsons and the Texas Road Gamblers, they didn't have many tournaments to go and practice their craft. They just had cash games, and the improvement curve was very different than nowadays. You can find Hold'em games anywhere. There's a tournament in every casino, $60 tournaments, and of course you got the big marquee series. Mixed games are, further behind in that evolution, I suppose. And someone who obviously enjoys them, is successful at them, such as yourself. It's not just that there's not too much theory out there to learn, but even on the practice end of it, it's pretty difficult. Yes, it does exist online on certain, online poker platforms, but at least from my experience and travels that I've had in Europe, in America, it's almost impossible to find low stakes mixed games, let alone, the higher stakes. If you're well bankrolled, I guess you can always put, some sort of a game together, something like that. How do you get your reps in, and practice? And again, part two is, what would you recommend to someone? I guess, how can they get their reps in?
Yeah, there isn't exactly an easy answer, unfortunately. Personally, I played a lot on a particular site or two when I was improving, and until then, had barely played live. There were like 2 mixed game tournaments in the UK that I had ever played before I went to my first World Series.
Wow.
And yeah, so I think that's correct. And yeah, in short, for me, it was unfortunately very difficult to get my reps in that way. So even online, I just have to be battling even just other regs, heads up or something. I'd be playing sit and goes, I'd be open sitting most tables, trying to get action, and it was difficult. It was unfortunately the answer, really. Especially in the UK. And at that time, that was kind of my only options, really. There weren't even really many games running. So just sitting tables on my own for some of the time, waiting for that. And yeah, as you said, especially low stakes. I was fortunate that the bracelet boosted my bankroll where I was able to. But yeah, even during my first World Series, that was when I was trying the cash games as well as the tournaments, that's what I was trying to do. And yeah, unfortunately, there weren't that many available in some scenarios. So it was difficult. I kind of wish I had a better answer in some ways. And obviously in the US, there are lots of other games that are more accessible, I think.
Yeah, Las Vegas in particular, you can find them here and there. Yeah,
Vegas for the availability, but in other parts of the country, I guess they're not so easy, and especially online. So yeah.
Well, to perhaps hone it a little bit further, there was an experience I had once, and there was a very telling response from a poker pro. I was at, I believe, EPT Barcelona, and the lowest stakes cash games that they had there were 5-5 euros. There was no 1-2, 1-3, no 2-5. It was 5-5. And at the time, I had never played that high before for me. And I was like, well, I'm not sufficiently rolled for this. And someone said to me, there's nothing to be afraid of. The same, 250, 300 euros you were willing to risk is the same money at that table, A. And B, the worst players are playing at that limit because there's nothing lower. Do you believe that sentiment to be true at a 20-40 or a 30-60 mix? Because that's the lowest you can typically find in most places. Do you believe that's true? Or is everyone kind of smelling for blood in the water?
I think it's largely true, but I guess at least 2 things happen. One is that there are some people kind of in your shoes or similar who are kind of scared by that stake in whatever way, both because they might assume the caliber of players better, and just also from a bankroll wise, they might be afraid to risk, let's say a 5x bigger game than they normally play if they normally play 4-8. So that was even the case with me, for example, the World Series, when the lowest was 20-40 and I was playing up to 4-8 or 9, something like that for my first World Series, where it was kind of daunting initially. So I think that assumption can be correct in a way, like you're saying. There are going to be some better players than if it was the same game lower. The other thing that can happen is you get say 50, 100 players who are regular, that they're going to drop down as well. if like there aren't 50, 100 games going, or they just think that 20, 40, 30, 60 games better. So you're going to get some players coming down from there, which can sometimes make it tougher. So it's kind of hard to say. But I mean, at the same time, like the 20, 40 games is still great, but you can get the coming down from the higher stakes, which can make it worse. Yeah.
Well, one place that legendarily the mixed games do happen at the Nosebleed Stakes. It's now called Legends Room. Most of us know it as Bobby's Room. I imagine you've stepped foot on that hallowed ground before. Any interesting, I mean, some people don't like to be named, there or anything like that, so you don't have to name names, but any interesting stories or something funny, that happened, behind the glass walls that maybe you could entertain us with?
I wish I had more interesting stories. I have played there a couple of times, and then it kind of moved outside of the room itself as well since then to like upstairs in the Bellagio, and then also occasionally in the Resorts World, where I like played it, where it's still like the quote unquote Bobby's Rooms game, but just not right in Bobby's Room.
Correct.
And yeah, still nobody calls it a Legends Room, by the way. It's still Bobby's Room. All of the regs call it Bobby's Room. So yeah, I wish I had more interesting stories, but nothing really stands out that I can think of. But yeah, it's been some fun games for sure.
Was there an instance where perhaps, again, I don't know, but was there an instance where perhaps, I don't know, a famous wealthy, a whale walks in, or a famous athlete, or musician, I don't know, something like that, who just, has got tons of money, and, you're just there to entertain while making him pay the price?
I absolutely wish I could say yes to any of those, but no.
I guess they know better.
I know there was the founder of Expedia, I know, was in one of the games, but I didn't manage. I was on the waiting list on that.
Oh, shame. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. No, mostly reckless.
Okay, fair. So just to end up my questions before we seg into the community questions here, I know that you're headed to Vancouver very soon. You do obviously travel the world a ton. Is this meant to be sort of like a long-term move for you?
Yeah, this is at least longer, potentially. Kind of unclear right now, but yeah, this is basically my first time moving abroad, so I'm quite excited.
Yeah.
It's going to be for at least like 4.5 months until the World Series.
Okay.
And then I'll basically decide from then if I would choose to extend it in some way when I get back from the World Series or after that. Yeah, so that's to be seen, but yeah, definitely exciting as a longer term prospect.
Obviously a very big life change. I know that maybe prying just a little bit, but any particular catalyst?
There isn't like one specific catalyst.
Okay.
There's no like specific reasons, I guess, for me to live anywhere in particular. I mean, I've pretty much lived in Southampton, or had that as my base like my whole life, from like familiarity, and have some family here. But thankfully I don't really have many responsibilities at this time in my life that I have the freedom that I'm able to do that, and would like to try something new. Would like to try like living abroad. I think it'll be a enriching experience, I hope. Have some friends there too, and have always been recommended to go there and live there by lots of friends who live there. So I'm excited to venture to some new pastures and try new things. Yeah.
Good luck to you. Obviously a lot closer to Vegas, so you can hop down a little bit more easy as well, and still play online, with the rest of the world. So that's pretty cool. Massive best of luck to you. It's obviously a very big thing, and just full disclosure, folks, Benny was very kind to make time whilst he was packing up to move his life over. So I sincerely appreciate that you've made that time, Benny. It's pretty cool. I'm definitely enjoying peppering you with all these mixed game questions. And now it's time to see if the folks in the Cards Chat community have some mixed game questions for you guys. This is the portion of the show where you submit your questions that you want to ask our guests. We have a dedicated thread on the Cards Chat forums for this. So as we announce who our future guests will be, please be sure to send in your questions for them. And the first one comes from Pirate Glenn. Pardon?
I said I'm excited for some of these.
Okay, cool. Pirate Glenn wants to know as follows. It's awesome that you have 4 WSOP bracelets, Benny. Of those 4, which were the toughest heads up?
I think it has to be the Raz. Yeah, the 10K Raz. The first one, I mean, I think maybe even the first 2 or 3 were all like relatively quick. At least compared to my Raz battle, they were relatively quick. Where there was pretty much just a few like key hands that swung it. And the Raz was, yeah, as we talked about, a pretty tough battle where it both went into the second day, and I went down to that point where he had the big chip lead. I think in all the other 3, well, 2 of them I had the big chip lead already coming into it, and then yeah, the third one it was kind of even. So yeah, that was toughest, I guess, both mentally and yeah.
Cool question. You don't get to ask that too many people who have 4 different bracelets to choose from and think through. Love that one. Another one from Pirate Glenn. Where did your PokerStars screen name Run Godlike come from?
I guess, I mean, there's not too much interesting answer. Yeah, just I made it up.
Okay.
When, yeah, I like had another one on a previous site, just about similar as well, just about running well, and it was like the best you can possibly run. The hope to as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And also occasionally, I guess, has probably seemed to like tilt people over the years when they're like, this guy runs so hard. Like that wasn't an intention of it, but it just seemed like a byproduct occasionally. Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, Mr. Helmuth, episode 4, by the way, we interviewed Phil Helmuth. He's got his white magic, and you've got your ninja maneuvers. Those are well talked about throughout the poker world. Can you tell us a little bit more what you mean by this term? Pirate Glenn wants to know.
So it's mostly like there's some like niche like short stack things that you can potentially do in some scenarios, especially in like mixed game tournaments where I think there's some things that are potentially like a bit unexplored by the masses, where I guess in a similar way to Helmuth, where he's less willing to risk his tournament life, where some other people just like, oh, I have 3 big bets left, let's just like get it all into the middle in some way. But there are definitely ways where you can have a bit more room for creativity, where you don't necessarily need to risk your tournament life if it's not necessary, or there's spots where you can manufacture some extra fold equity in order for you to survive, basically, without needing to be all in and just have fold equity in that spot. So that kind of like somewhat cheeky things like that I've looked at before. I think I'm pretty good at that. I think it's an extra edge over some people. Yeah.
Fair. And just to sort of illustrate for those who, that may be just a little bit too high level of talking, I just can speak from my own experience, limited experience, but you can sit in a mixed game tournament with very few big blinds, because, the games are limit, if you're playing horse, something like that, for quite a while, very comfortably, and wait for your spots. So, I think that's the type of stuff that you're alluding to, Benny, but, 5 big blinds is plenty. You can still make those ninja maneuvers and rebound back to a healthier stack size. Last question from Pirate Glenn. What advice would you offer an aspiring pro today playing both live and online for the first time?
With zero experience, this is
not someone who needs to know the what beats what, but like someone who decides I'm ready to go pro. I think that's what we're aiming for here. At least someone who thinks they're ready to go pro.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you've never played online or live but have aspirations to go pro, I would, I guess, say you might need to reevaluate that aspiration further down after.
Fair play. Fair play.
So I would say, I guess put in some volume and experience, make sure you're a winning player, study as you can. The kind of, I guess, boring, sensible answer is going to be get volume in where it's clear you're a kind of consistent winning player and are going to be able to realistically turn pro in a consistent winning way that it's going to be a viable profession for you.
My follow-up on this is not Pirate Gen's question, but would you advocate for some sort of staking or backing?
That's again quite an individual question. It's going to depend on lots of things, like if you have a life bankroll as well, that might be quite healthy. Aside from that, I'd say overall, no, it's better to not go down that road. There are reasons to do it that can help. If you're starting out, then no, like staking can be if you say want to move up stakes from where you are, like if you, for example, in the scenario where like you want to play live, but there are no like games below 1020. So like you can say staking if you'd say play 1020 and 2040, but you only have half of yourself or something like that.
Right.
You want to. So those are like reasonable scenarios where staking's a good avenue when you just want to put in more volume, or you think it's going to be more profitable than not being staked, essentially. But as far as like life stability, that's going to be very individual and depends on the kind of staking deals there are. There's going to be like some with makeup, some without, some you're just paying for a portion, some you're not investing any of your own money. So yeah, that's.
I can't help but reflect, we're both members of the tribe. So many times they ask you a question and the answer is, it depends. And in poker, it really is that as well sometimes. Acid Burn FX, one of our wonderful regular contributors here, asks always some creative questions. We're gonna extricate ourselves a little bit more from the strategy stuff, just more like personal reflections from you, Benny. And with this, we will end. We got 3 questions, very, very good questions. Acid Burn FX wants to know, if you could magically change one thing in your life, what would it be? Give you a time bank, Chip.
Yeah. I guess probably it would be something along the lines of like a personal relationship, like maybe just like being married to someone who I'm incredibly in love with. That's probably the honest answer. Yeah, just, I don't know, find the love of my life instantly. And
Beautiful.
yeah.
Well, whenever that does come, I hope it's a meaningful moment for you. Beautiful, like, a very truthful answer. I like it.
Yeah.
Next question from Acid Burn FX. Also, ladies, Benny's available. Just saying. What is your favorite thing you own and why?
I mean, my first answer, I was thinking it was guitar, but it's probably not, because like they're not like unique. So then I was thinking, I mean, maybe as far as uniqueness, it might be like a bracelet. I don't know, as far as them also being sentimental, but it might be somewhat kind of lame cliche answer. I don't know. So yeah, I wouldn't say there's anything like particularly stand out other than that.
Okay.
Kind of look around for inspiration, but yeah.
Well, you've been packing, so maybe there's something there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll end off with the final question then, and I really like this creativity here. Thank you, Acid Burn FX. Benny, if you could have a superpower, what would you choose and why?
I don't really know. I feel like most of them would have like some caveat in some way. I'm trying to think. I don't know. Can't really think of anything original beyond the like standard things. Like mind reading has, I don't know, obvious benefits, but that's probably has like cons as well in certain ways. So I was trying to think of something that would like only be nice. I was trying to think like a more creative, original answer. Maybe it's reading minds, because I mean, I feel like you can advance in so many areas in life, but it might just be something like learning like literally anything you wanted, like instantly, something like that, or like having the ability to like do anything you want instantly, something like that.
That's a creative answer. I like that. That's really cool. So there's no shortcuts, as we know. The Benny Glaser that we got to speak with for the last hour plus, it did not happen overnight. So I suppose if one could wish themselves into that situation instantly, that would be a pretty GTO move. Thanks to everyone who sent in your questions for Benny Glaser. And again, a friendly reminder to all of you out there in the Cards Chat community. We'd love to see you submit your questions for our future podcast guests in the dedicated thread on the forums. Please be sure to give us a good review on iTunes and spread the word via your social media channels if you like the show. Benny, before we let you go, anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
Nothing. That's all for me. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for having me on. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Cool, quite fair. Thank you very much again, Benny. I appreciate it. Thank you all for tuning in once again to another episode of Cards Chat. I'm Robbie Strazynski, and you can follow me on Twitter at CardPlayerLife. I wish you all a wonderful day.